Hello everyone and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. My name is FPL Phillips. It's time for another FPL Phillips team reveal ahead of Game Week 9 this time. And to be honest, I'm kind of getting to that point where I'm thinking more and more, are people even going to pay attention to these team reveals? Because I've had a few correct arrows in a row. I'm now currently sitting outside the top 1 million in the world. To be honest, I'm even having a nightmare in my mini leagues with all my mates who are starting to take the mick. So, I mean, to be honest, if there are a lot of people out there who have had worse starts to the season than me, and I can't complain too much, it's my own choices. Still got all the chips left in the bag, so not overreacting too much, but we have got some changes to make, and some players that need to move on, but also the team is relatively okay in terms of how it looks ahead of this game week. Took a hit last game week to try and set it up so it's looking okay for Game Week 9. My plan for the wildcard as well, that's coming your way today, as let's get into things. So as mentioned, I took a -4 last week and ended up kind of basically breaking even in the game week itself, but it did involve bringing in a player to basically replace Botman because I knew he was going to be out most likely, and lo and behold he was. So Botman 0 was replaced by not a return, but still ended up being a wise move basically to take the hit to make a defensive change as well, on top of what I was doing in my transfer in the midfield, which I discussed, which was bringing in Heung-min Son. So we'll get into just having a look and revealing the whole team relatively swiftly, and then discussing the entire thoughts behind what I'm doing this week as a whole. I've just got the one free transfer, as I mentioned. I took a hit last week, so I've only got that one free in the bank, but 1.2 million to play with if it's there to be spent. In goal, we're going with Turner this week, so we have got Johnston down there on the bench. Happy with my goalkeepers for one more week at least. The fixtures do look a little bit more difficult as we look towards Game Week 10, but Luton at home, best fixture you can have basically. No-brainer really to start Turner in this one if you have him. And then in defence, where we've got a back three that looks very nice this week. So we've got 3 home fixtures, Trippier, Udogie and Matty Cash, who was the player I brought in for that -4 last week. Very happy with all these 3 assets. The underlying data looks brilliant for all of them. Cash in terms of XG in particular, and then Trippier, unexpected assists. I'm still happy to spend that little bit extra money on him. I know a lot of people at the moment, whether they played the wild card last week or maybe even this week, will be going for a cheaper option. So Botman, whether he's back, or maybe even Burn if Botman isn't going to return. But I think Trippier is probably worth considering with that extra bit of money. I know when we're trying to get Salah and Haaland into the same team, then it becomes less of a possibility. But at the moment, I've got no scope to really bring Salah into my draft this week at least. So Trippier, I'm okay having some funds allocated there to try and scrape back a few points that way through the terms of assists and also some bonus points if Trippier can get his hands on those, which we know he loves to do. In midfield is where we brought in Heung-min Son last week. The rest of the midfield looks pretty shaky, but it has some nice fixtures this week, which is why I'm inclined to stick with these players for at least one more game week, which seems to be a broken record. They say Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, but that's what I'm doing with Mbomo and with Marcus Rashford, because they have been absolutely shocking these last few weeks. For Foden's not been great either. I mean, 2 of those players I've just seen play absolutely brilliantly in the England game against Italy. So if we can have those kind of those levels of performances at the weekend, that would be much appreciated, guys. Touch wood for that. But I'm not expecting too much. But Foden, Rashford and Mbomo are assets that I would love to move on to, have Salah, Bowen, Neto maybe even, Anthony Gordon perhaps in my draft. But at the moment, I don't think it's worth, taking a hit or maybe even using a free on that move. And to be honest, I'd much more rather roll. The only reason I won't roll this week will probably be if there's any injury news, or if I decide for certain that I want to play the wildcard next week, because there's no point rolling a transfer into a wildcard. I then have 2 frees for next game week, which would seem basically be burning a transfer on a wildcard, because you don't need 2 frees on a wildcard. You have unlimited transfers anyway, and you go back to having 1 the week after you played the wildcard. I'm sure all of you guys know that, but just a reminder for anyone who may be in a similar predicament to me at this point. So yeah, Mbomo, Foden and Rashford I'm begrudgingly holding on to for one more week. And then we've got Haaland up front alongside Julian Alvarez. So the Man City triple up get one more week. Without Rodri, they do look like a bit of a different side, but that won't last too much longer. So again, another thing that will probably cause me to maybe put off the wild card for that one more week. Probably end up holding it eventually all the way to game week 18 or 19 at this point, where it'll be the final point where I'm allowed to use it. But I'm not going to complain of my team looking pretty good on paper for a game week. Down there on the bench, we've also got Botman. If he's back fit and available, then he'll still be down there on the bench, but first sub. Very happy to have him coming in if someone does unexpectedly miss out. We've then got Kabore and Mobama as my other two outfield subs, with Johnston, with Crystal Palace's away tricky fixture to Newcastle, is going to be there as my bench keeper this week. As mentioned, they don't look too great for game week 10, but I'm not going to base any wildcard decisions or anything like that or whether my goalkeeper fixtures are looking difficult, because I've already seen with Johnston last week, in fact, how he can go away to somewhere like Old Trafford and get a surprise result. So clean sheets are very difficult to predict so far this season, so I'm not going to be basing too much on that. The problem is with Mbeumo and Rashford and Foden and these kind of players, if they don't continue to perform, then I am going to have to consider using that chip in Game Week 10, which was the original point and strategy where I planned to play it in order to load up on some Liverpool players, some West Ham assets as well, who I currently own none of in my side. But looking at Game Week 9 anyway, I have got the captain's armband on Erling Haaland, but that's also other options. As I should say, there are some other options for captaincy this week. Erling Haaland is not the only one. If you've got Mohamed Salah in your team, then you're probably wise to consider captaining him at home to Everton. That's the early kickoff on Saturday, if you do consider that kind of thing, because, you know, Gandhi and his quotes and his famous quote to never back the early kickoff has been proven right in the last few weeks, and has been proven right numerous times in the past, in fact, if you buy into all that. And then we've, of course, got Heung-min Son, who I own in my side, and a lot of you will own as Spurs host Fulham. So, predicted points-wise this week, it's Erling Haaland who the algorithm is backing, 7.5, with Salah just behind on 7.4, and Heung-min Son quite a way down on 5.6. But in terms of the weakest defence that these teams are going up against, Heung-min Son and Fulham look the weakest defence. So Son looks the best player to target if you're going fixture-wise, with Brighton looking a pretty poor defence still themselves, 1.82 expected goals conceded per 90 so far this season, compared to Fulham's 1.86 as mentioned. Everton looking a little bit more defensively sound, 1.52, and we know that kind of Liverpool-Everton games can be very tough, can be very scrappy, and often don't have quite as many goals in them. Touch wood with Salah not in my team and all that. But yeah, I'd probably lean towards going for Haaland or going for Son this week. Currently, my armband is on Erling Haaland, as mentioned. In terms of teams, Man City dropping down, so Liverpool now looking like the biggest goal-scoring force, 2.28 XG for them as a side, with Spurs in second with 2.12, and Man City, you know, struggling without Rodri at the other end of the pitch as well as defensively. So yeah, Rodri, a very instrumental force to that team. I think that's what's bringing their average down, because a few weeks ago they were top for this XG total. So surprising to see Man City at the bottom of any kind of metric really when you look at attacking data. And then in terms of individuals, Mohamed Salah, 8.61 expected FPL points so far this season per 90 minutes. Him ahead of Erling Haaland, again, something we were very not used to seeing at any point really last season. And Heung-min Son then on 6.9. But in terms of any other assets this week outside of the captaincy, who might you want to target? Well, these are the top 10 predicted point scorers that the Fantasy Football Flicks algorithm, I should say, has backed ahead of this game week. Mbeumo coming in fourth is something that I'm quite happy to see, given that he's still in my side. 5.5 predicted points for him in that game against Burnley. We then got Ollie Watkins in that Aston Villa fixture against West Ham on 5.3. Trent Alexander-Arnold, as mentioned, Liverpool assets coming to look good. 5.3 points for him as well. We have Visser on 5.2, so another Brentford asset making into the top 10, with Alisson Becker on 4.9. Trippier, another one of my picks, on 4.7. And Phil Foden, again, another player in my team, rounding off the top 10 on 4.7. So it's kind of why I'm less inclined to make a transfer this week. Let me know how many of the top 10 you guys own down below in the comments to try and help us out with all that YouTube algorithm stuff. But yeah, that is going to wrap up my team reveal for this week. Let me know if you guys were in my predicament. Would you make a transfer? Would you bother using the free? I think the problem is that I'm not 100% committed to using the wildcard next week, and I would maybe even consider trying to take a -4, maybe even behold a -8 next week to try and get Salah in if absolutely necessary, because I think he could definitely be a captaincy option for me over the next foreseeable future. So what would you guys do? How would you get the funds for Salah? Would you make some drastic downgrades in midfield, maybe downgrading Foden and Rashford to Neto and Gordon to try and get Mbeumo up to Mo Salah in that way, or something similar? Let me know what your transfer plan would be to try and get in some Liverpool assets, or do you even think Salah is 100% worth it? Can I go a different route to try and cover his points? As well as that, let me know any questions you have for your own teams down below in the comments. I will try my best to get back to every single one of you. But again, I'll say thank you very much for watching if you're tuning in for another video. If you are new around here, make sure to subscribe, leave a thumbs up on the video too. If you did want to help us out with all that algorithm stuff, of course, it's absolutely free to do. And if you want to see how the Fantasy Football Fix team predicts your score for this game week, as well as accessing all the other amazing tools available, then you can check out the links down below in the description. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Goodbye.